Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is once again the Hillbilly Think Tank with Spencer Keck coming at you from Kentucky. And boy, oh boy, what a day it's been. You know, just yesterday, it was the Day of the Dead celebration, or day of memorializing those who've died in our life. At my church, we had a prayer and remembered all the folks in our life that have meant so much to us, that have passed, and that we honor. And I had to think of my brother, Kelly, who I talked about just a couple of days ago. He passed on only about 4.5, not quite 5 years after he lost his leg and hand in Afghanistan. We had a tough life, but at the same time, we had a beautiful life. But one of those tough memories is the memory of often going hungry at night as children when my former stepdad and my mom did not provide food for us. There were nights while my mom was pregnant when the only thing we had to eat was oatmeal. No milk to put on it, not even any sugar to add some extra empty calories to it. That was the meal for my mom and for my sister in the womb. Sadly, my mom developed um, and during that pregnancy, and that cancer, was uterine cancer. And as soon as my sister was delivered, they had to remove my mom's uterus. Now, later on in my sister's life, not long after actually, it was obvious that there were developmental shortcomings in my sister. And all these years after, I've had to come to wonder, was that due to not having enough food, to starving uh, while my mom was pregnant? The whole family was starving, but also that babe in the womb was starving. I know now how many vitamins a pregnant woman needs. It's quite a bit more than normal, because they're having to feed that developing infant. And there were so many vitamins that were missing that my mom needed. And stepdad didn't get on WIC, Women, Infants, and Children plan. He didn't get on SNAP. We just relied on him occasionally, once in a very blue moon, getting a job. The rest of the time, it was my papa, Dr. Spencer, sending some money that basically he called it milk and egg money, not really realizing that it was the only food we were getting. He thought he was supplementing what he hoped and assumed my stepdad was doing, to provide for us. But the stepdad would not hold down a job, even with his college education. He had a degree as an architect. My mom had a degree in education and social work, and she had been a teacher and a social worker before she married this religious extremist who, said that women had to stay at home, take care of the children, women had to be submissive, children had to be, silent except when spoken to. It was a traumatic childhood, but one of the worst traumas was that hunger. So here we are, sitting there thinking on the Day of the Dead about how sad my brother would be, because he also became a social worker and he was a combat medic. He was a combat medic when he was injured, and You know, we devoted our life to making sure that our kids would not starve. But we never, ever looked down on anyone who didn't have the means to pay for full meals for their kids. And if they needed SNAP, my God, we knew there were plenty of people in America paying their taxes for that go for things worse than SNAP, you know, such as bombs and missiles that we'll never hopefully use, you know, subsidies for corporations that don't need them, but should be paying their fair share of taxes, but they're not, you know. So, yeah, I will never look down on a child, for sure, not a child. Never look down on a child that is hungry. And I will never say, oh, that's the child's fault, or no, we're not going to pay the child because we want to stick the finger in the eye of the parent that's on SNAP with the family, you know. So I went today to the SNAP website to see, hey, what is it that it says there? What are they, what is the government claiming? Oh my God. I've never in my life seen something as bad as I discovered here. It says Senate Democrats have now voted 13 times not to fund the food stamp program. That's an absolute lie. The funding for SNAP has been allocated far before this. There's also been a shortfall funding in USDA sitting there waiting to be given out. It goes on to say, also known as Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. Bottom line, the well has run dry. Another absolute lie. The well has not run dry at all. We have the funds to pay for the 40 billion being given to Argentina. We have funds to give to Israel in the billions. We have funds, but we want to be cruel and use that as a political tool. It also says we are approaching an inflection point for Senate Democrats. No, we've reached an inflection point for the cruelty of MAGA. That's what we've reached. It says here they can continue to hold out for health care for illegal aliens and gender mutilation procedures or reopen the government. Well, that's an absolute lie. It's already illegal for illegal citizens to receive SNAP. They don't. There's no gender mutilation policy in the healthcare plans of the U.S. government. It's not there. It won't be there. And that's not anything but a lie, propaganda. So it says that we can reopen the government so babies and most vulnerable among us can receive critical nutritional help. Just all propaganda. When will enough be enough? Today? Tomorrow? Next year? Come on, folks. Enough is enough. We can't do this anymore to the least among us. All right? This is not anything at all the spirit of the Christ I know, the Buddha that I've read about. No spiritual guide, no spiritual system, no philosophical system that is worth anything in this world would allow us to play on the suffering of children and the starvation of children in our own country, of all places, of all places in the world. Why would we ever get to the point where we think it's okay to use pregnant women starving children as a pawn and a pressure point because we don't want to fund health care for the vulnerable and we don't want to feed the vulnerable. We're going to play them off each other. This is heinous. Absolutely gut-wrenching evil. Never in my life have I seen a party use empathy as a bad word like these guys do. This is not appropriate. This administration is lying to us bald-facedly and trying to say that the group that wants to make sure that my niece that I have custody of that also has Medicaid want to say that she cannot have Medicaid, wants to say that my family members going through cancer, going through other treatments that are on Medicaid shouldn't be allowed to have it. They're planning on that, on being able to hold out, push out, starve the poor, and act like it's the fault of the group of people that are doing everything they can to hold on to our last shred of empathy in this nation. I have empathy for the sick, for the poor, for the starving. I care for every single Kentuckian, every single American. Want us all to be able to float on this boat together. But we can't do it when the rich passengers are throwing off the poor as the Titanic sinks in order to save themselves more of what? You're taking the ship down. We're all going to go down eventually if you keep playing this evil, insidious game. Come on, folks. We've got to love one another as we love ourselves. We got to love our brother and our sister. We've got to be our brother's keeper, our sister's keeper. We cannot abide by this way. Man, come on. This is not going to abide. This is not leading us to greatness. It is leading us to becoming like Argentina and worse, that we just bailed out. Where only the rich oligarchs have any power, any say, and everyone else is just a side thought, if at all. All right, guys, let's love our neighbors as ourselves, as I said. Let's be good to one another. Bless your corazon. Have a great night. And let's move past this into graciousness and empathy, please.